So what's up, y'all? This is Dr. J and
Dr. K.
doing our last finale episode of In Treatment, season 4, starting Aduba. And guess what, y'all? Y'all not gonna believe this. Dr. J actually found an Eladio episode he likes. Can you believe it? All right, so here we go. So let's just get into the recap. So basically what happens is Eladio comes to the last session. Like we said, he did like the Jennifer Hudson, "You're gonna love me," and he showed back up again to the therapy session. It seems like he come to the acceptance that he is no longer bipolar. He is saying that he is actually beginning to forge a good relationship with the psychiatrist. I'm hoping that those boundaries haven't been crossed, but we know Eladio style, you know. But I want to just really, before I really jump deep into this recap, I just want to say, perhaps I judged him harshly because I was projecting a lot of anger towards Eladio that maybe I should have directed towards Brooke, in the sense that she is the professional and she allowed him to cross boundaries. And it was just a perfect storm of chaos because primarily he was looking to be mothered, she was looking to mother someone. And I'm actually kind of happy, that they showed the failure that took place in therapy. Because we have a tendency to see in these series that the therapist is and the client always find a perfect resolution. So, what do you think about the ending and the fact that that Eladio and Brooke really had to, in a sense, break away from each other? It's like physically, she actually got up from the room to go to the other room. And it was kind of like this weird thing where he started having therapy through like this sort of wall that kind of reminds me of like a confessional booth, like with Catholicism or so to speak, because then he began to see that this relationship was inappropriate. But what do you think about how they ended this therapy session and how realistic was this portrayal of therapy?
Well, so I take pause with the idea of failure. I think in this instance, it was an opportunity for growth for both of them. So I wouldn't want to dissuade viewers from seeking therapy in case somebody's going through something or whatever. I think the real issue is that it was still therapeutic. It was still a therapeutic relationship for him to see his patterns and how he interacts with others. Her allowing him, I don't even know that she did it on purpose, but in her poor boundaries, she was able to see how far his poor boundaries would go. And then we see that it's a pervasive issue, that it's just, this is kind of who he is, and that's the nature of personality disorders. So to some degree, when you're dealing with personality disorders, it's difficult to sort of disentangle from that anyway. So at a certain point, there would be maybe a push-pull because of his obsessive compulsive nature. So I think it was an opportunity for him to learn about himself, what he was seeking, that he can stand on his own and be resourceful. And then, although I wouldn't have wanted her to break boundaries, still it was an opportunity for her to learn therapeutically what she needed to do for herself. So I think, again, I wouldn't use the word failure, just opportunity to grow. I'm thankful. I mean, it's a fictional story, but I would not have wanted it to go any further than that. God forbid he had, suicidal tendencies and real deep abandonment issues, and this took him over the edge, then we'd be having a different conversation. So you never want to get on the edge, but I think in this sense, at least there was some resolution and both could learn and grow from it. So,
well, do you think he's going to be all right? I noticed that she gave him a referral to another therapist. But considering his pattern is in terms of his being susceptible to maternal transference, do you think that another therapist would have a different result than Brooke had, but considering the type of patient he is?
I mean, a good referral ought to come with some background information.
Okay.
So I would hope that she chose somebody who is more familiar with his personality disorder, and that can meet him where he is. And so I don't think it's just here's a number and go with it. I think part of it too will be a backstory to her, and we're allowed to do that for therapeutic reasons in terms of confidentiality, as long as it's for his treatment. And he gives permission and all of that stuff. But I think he could do well now that he's seeing more clearly, where his pitfalls are, what his deep needs are. Then he can go into it in a different way.
I would probably say, judging at it, just looking at the narrative in the way that the story unfolds, I thought that the metaphor of the doors were quite significant in a sense that what we find is that Brooke, in a sense, has to close the door to that therapy, and then Eladio, in a sense, has to open the door to step away from it. I thought it was cool the way they did those the door scenes and that sort of stuff. I kind of thought that Brooke would have a little more crying. I mean, you could tell that she was, she was emotive. You could see the emotions. But I don't know. I just kind of thought it would be more gut-wrenching tears as opposed. Do you think that she intentionally went to the other room on purpose like that? Was that a therapeutic strategy? Or do you think that was more of a human emotion, like I'm so hurt or in so much pain that I don't want them to see me like this?
I didn't think of it initially as a therapeutic move. I thought she was just leaving on her own, just to step away from it. Because at that point, did he say he loved her? And then that's what kind of turned it. And it may have been kind of a smack in the face, like, whoa, this has really gone too far. One, that it went too far for him to say that, but what did it trigger in her? That she wants her own son to say that too. So it could be both, therapeutic, like we gotta make a break. We literally have to make a break right here. In the same way that with Colin, she let him sit in her seat, and sometimes you have to shift position. So I think part of it was to make this clean break, and the other part was it was so overwhelming. And she just knew in that moment it had gone too far. Like there was no recovery back when he's like, I love you. And then she wants him to love her, symbolically with her own son. So it needed to end.
Oh, this is one question that maybe some viewers may have. I just thought about it as you were speaking about this whole concept of love. Is it possible for a therapist to love a client without crossing boundaries?
That's a good question. The boundary crossing is the action. And like we always tell people, like you can't help your emotions, but you can help what you do with them. And so, if you come to be fond of a client and all of that kind of thing, I think it can naturally happen. But the challenge is, do you act on those things? So that's when we talk about having supervision for ourselves. If there's certain clients like, oh, they're on the schedule, I can't wait to see them. You need to check what that's about. Or the reverse. Oh my God, this person again, So anytime there's any kind of transference that you're getting something out of it, you're not able to be that blank slate, to be unbiased, to just be in a helping position, then it is something you want to see your own supervisor or colleagues. You can consult with colleagues about that kind of thing. But I think, so the idea of love depends on where you go with that. Like what level of love? Is it a fondness? Like I only work with kids, so I really do care about the kids and their well-being. If we're talking about a romantic love, then that's a whole different thing. Like it should never get to that point. So.
Okay, so before we close the session with Eladio, I just want to say, from a narrative standpoint, I'm used to narratives where we have some sort of thematic connection that connects everything all together. And I felt that with Eladio, it felt kind of disjointed because of like Jeremy, just the different way he would filter stories. But now I understand that the narrative was a bit muddled or muddied in a sense because the whole therapy relationship was muddy. And so we couldn't really see how maybe the true therapeutic relationship would have worked because of the back and forth transference between the two. So I would say from a thematic standpoint and just me judging from a narrative, now it totally makes sense because, and I would probably say too, I was really, in a sense, at Brooke from the beginning, I was really kind of struggling with how Paul from seasons 1 through 3, who kind of he blurred the lines in therapy too, but it at least thematically, the story remained intact. But now I see that this was muddy, from that standpoint. So from like critical cultural standpoint, as a cultural critic and as a literary person, now I can see why this, in a sense, Eladio and Brooke were unreliable narrators in this story. So from a therapeutic standpoint, what lessons do you think basically therapists and clients can learn from the ending of this series with Eladio?
Again, like I said, just looking at the opportunities for therapeutic relationships, I think it was muddied, and I appreciate that for me, I do appreciate that in the story. I've always had a fond place for Eladio, just because I work with complex families and kids. And sometimes we see therapy on TV or on the big screen, and it feels very cut and dry. And I know why this happened, why this person is this way. Oftentimes it is related to a trauma, but he also had other things going on within him that just complicated things. And so I think they're going to be complicated clients. And I think at the same time, there's a humanity for therapists that people don't often see also. And so I appreciate seeing that mix. Now, did it go as every therapy experience would be? No, I mean, it's fiction, you know. I mean, even the very fact that she works from her home in that way, that's different for me. Most people don't work in their homes in that type of way. And even if they did, they'd have a home office. And so there was something about letting people in her living room and in her space. The very fact that he could go through her, her halls and see her pictures and all of that, that was a bit much for me. Because even with Paul, his office was separate. Yeah. It was a totally separate life. And then when Eladio comes in and she's like, well, what do you see about my life though? There's no family, there's no this, there's no that. So I think there are it's Hollywood. So it's that, but I think what people can get is that life is complex and it's okay to bring it to therapy, and also be mindful of if those boundaries are crossed, that you still have agency, that you can still go to somebody else, you can find another therapist, another clinician, that where you can get all the, the support that you need.
And, and taking it back again from a narrative standpoint, now that I think about it, like the overarching theme is the muddiness of that transference, but also I would say what made his story even more complex is because each story with Eladio was his own mini vignette. And so it was like, you'll have Jeremy, then you'll have him standing out seeming suicidal, and then you had moments where Jeremy was an adolescent, then an adult, then a romantic relationship, and all of these different things. And I felt like, for me, if I was reading this as a story, I was looking at it, I was like, this is so disjointed. But if it's many vignettes, then the story would have many different starting points. But the overarching theme, again, was the muddiness of transference. So
and lives, I have a number of families that way, and I made, the end of each session I put for next week. And it may be 2 or 3 sessions before I come back based on what's happened in the family, the dynamics, crises, whatever. And I'm like, oh, we never did get back to that. So we need to bring it back. It may have a consistent theme or flow, but it can be messy, and it's okay to bring that to therapy. That was always my thing with you and Eladio. Like, it's okay to bring all of that.
Yeah, and for me, like I said, I was just kind of looking for, like, his narrative was not as cohesive as Colin, Layla, and Brooks.
Yeah.
So,
and that happens, and it could be a function of the complexity of who he was, also, in terms of race, class, gender, maybe sexual orientation, age. I mean, all of that. So all the cultural markers that you can have, he kind of fit different things too. So
yeah, now that you mention it, his whole actual being is fluent because he was what gender binary is that, or what do they call it?
Non-binary.
Yeah, he was non-binary with his gender because he described his sexuality as fluid. He had men, he had women. He didn't really have boundaries on any sort of thing and then when you look at him from a racial standpoint, you could tell he's Latin, but you can also, but it's kind of like nondescript. Does he have African features? Obviously it looks like he is biracial, like white as well. So it's sort of nondescript, but having all of these different things, which may reflect just the casting as well. So
just a point of correction, because somebody probably will in the comments. His sexual orientation was fluid, but when you talk about non-binary, that's more about sexual identity.
Oh, okay.
Like, how does he ascribe in terms of gender and sex? And I don't know that he ever spoke on that. So that's a little different.
So all right. So this is our ending with Eladio, man. May you have future good sessions, Eladio. And sorry I was hard on you.